Hello and welcome back to the World Championship in Through the Ages. In my last game I was able to win against Kogito, definitely with some help of Vlada along the way. And with that I still have some hopes to actually win the group. In order to achieve that I need to win my last two-player game against Fjantarik and Gandhin, and Kogito has to win his two-player game against Fjantarik, so sadly I don't have it in my own hands. But no, I just need to try to win my last two games, and the first one of those that we are seeing today is the two-player game against Fjantarik. And now without further ado, let's take a look at the game. In this game I am playing in the first position, and first of all we can take a look at the leaders and wonders. And we have some culture leaders in age 2 with Shakespeare and Anthony Gaudi. However, there are no Bach and no Darwin. There is the Hollywood at the end, there's Gandhi at the end, and we have Chaplin as the only theater leader, so there's definitely some culture synergy. The potential for a culture fest is there, but not a lot of those leaders at least. We then have Sid Meier and Marie Curie, as well as Einstein for some science synergy. There's also Pierre, but no internet to maybe make his potential even bigger. We have then the Suez Canal, but no James Cook. We have no ocean liner service, but we have Maria Theresa. We have two military action leaders with Napoleon and Robespierre, and then also Nobel as just very solid science leader. We in H1 have Himeji Castle and the Great Walls, the two strength wonders. We have Universitas but no Silk Road. The Machu Picchu is there. Michelangelo is there for maybe the potential of a lot of wonder building. We have one military action leader with Jan Žižka, Barbarossa to help with the strength, also Eleanor Barbarossa to maybe go for a colonization game. Saladin is a very strong leader, and Leonardo for some alchemy and printing press synergy. I'm in first position, and I was not too thrilled about the choice that I have for my first turn. If I don't want to commit to the Colosseum, which I don't want to, because if I go for this, then Fjantarik can just go for Confucius, and afterwards for the pyramids, completely uncontested, gets the pyramids for one civil action at his second turn, and then I think he would just have a very strong turn, while I would be stuck with the Colosseum, plus maybe either Moses or Cleopatra. I think Fjantarik would go into the game with definitely an advantage, so I didn't want to go for the Colosseum here, but then the alternative is to just take a yellow card. Urban Growth is probably the best yellow card to take, but I had to think about if maybe taking the stockpile has any card row movement reasons in order to take it. But even if I take the stockpile and then Fjantarik, as I expected, it goes for Confucius, even then the pyramids would still stay on two civil actions. So at the end I just went with maybe the best yellow card, and then at the next turn I thought about maybe just picking pyramids for two civil actions, which is also maybe not that ideal, especially because I have to delay my leader. I thought about just building a mine, taking Cleo in hand, taking the pyramids, and then at least at turn 3 I can start with using Cleopatra's bonus, but I was not too thrilled about all of that, and but we have to see what solution I can find at my next turn. Fjantarik, as expected, goes for Confucius. And then it's my turn. Hammurabi's revealed the Stonehenge and the Hanging Gardens. I will start my turn with increasing my population, which is already an indicator that I don't go for a turn like pyramids, Cleopatra, and building a mine. And yeah, I do think I have some different options. As I said, I could just go for pyramids and Cleo, build a mine, but in this case I'm basically just delaying my leader, because I have Cleopatra only in hand and she isn't giving me any benefit. And if I am delaying my leader, then I thought it is maybe just better to don't take Leo at all and go for Hammurabi at the next turn, who is probably the stronger leader. Maybe with the pyramids a bit of overkill, but I think having a lot of civil actions in the early game, especially in a two-player game, is quite strong. So I thought if I go for pyramids now, then I should just wait for Hammurabi. However, there is maybe the option to just go for Cleo this turn, get the value out of my leader already this turn with building the second lab, and then I will miss out on the pyramids, but I still have the chance to get a Stonehenge for one civil action at the next turn and can get nice value out of Cleopatra. So the question is that maybe just better than now taking the pyramids for two civil actions and delaying my leader? Compared, I can get my leader going now and get at the next turn my wonder for one civil action. And the Stonehenge is a completely fine wonder, so if I go for the pyramids for two civil actions now, Fjantarik will get the Stonehenge. However, what is maybe a bit annoying for him is that either he grabs the Stonehenge for two civil actions, or he at his next turn has to spend a civil action to take an HA yellow card, which is maybe not that ideal, especially if his plan is indeed to go for the Stonehenge, which costs a lot of civil actions. And second of all, I do think the Stonehenge, while still being a completely solid wonder in two-player games, is maybe not that strong, or I do think that the best way to use the Stonehenge nicely is to just get something like Code of Laws or Monarchy going very quickly. However, in two-player games, there are only one copy of those technologies each, and hate drafting is a thing. So if those technologies are taken away, then it could be that just a bunch of science is stockpiled, and also Fjantarik has already Confucius, so I thought maybe there's the potential that all of that could be a bit of overkill. If I indeed go for Pyramids and for Hammurabi at the next turn, I might have the civil actions to just deny Monarchy and Code of Laws if they appear on the row at my turn. So with that, I at the end rather wanted to secure the pyramids for myself, have a civilization with I have a start with a lot of civil actions, when I then get Hammurabi the next turn, and even though I delay my leader and have to take the wonder for an additional civil action, I thought that position is the one that I prefer. So I just increase population, build a mine, take the pyramids, waiting for Hammurabi for the next turn. I will then draw a colonization card in the fighting band. The nice thing about Fjantarik now not being able to take the pyramids for one is also that Fjantarik can't really take the urban growth, because that would mean that the Stonehenge will be discarded before his next turn, so he makes the decision to go for the rich land. Interestingly, over the frugality. For the frugality, he would know that he can use it for certain, but of course there's a good chance that at some point in H1 he will be able to get either iron or irrigation, especially because he will definitely have the science to develop those technologies. Now it is my turn. That turn was relatively clear for me. I will go for Hammurabi, getting my leader going now, and then I have some civil actions left. I could, for example, just build my second lab, but then I have two civil actions left. I can also build a step, and I thought for those two civil actions left, it's just best to take the breakthrough, getting a bit of additional science. And then I also do think that in this situation it's best to not build a second lab, instead build a step of the pyramids. And the main reason for that is not that I necessarily want to rush the pyramids. I do think with having Hammurabi, maybe getting the additional science earlier could potentially be better in some situations, but here I didn't want to commit to my second lab, because a copy of printing press is coming down the row, and I could just have the chance to go into printing presses. There is Shakespeare and Godey in the game, and especially Shakespeare, as we have seen in the last game, can be potentially very strong, so I just wanted to leave myself open for that. Fjantarik can't easily deny the printing press. It would be a bit costly. He could potentially just take it, develop it, and build one, but then he doesn't have a civil action left to take the Stonehenge. Could maybe still be an interesting idea, but if he doesn't do it, then it's somewhat costly to deny it, and then I have the chance to go early into printing presses, maybe go for Leonardo later on, and then be prepared for Shakespeare in H2. I draw the immigration. Fjantarik seeds and opens the development of science. He builds the second lab, takes the Stonehenge, and he will actually deny the printing press. Doesn't want to give myself the chance to build some early printing presses. It's a bit awkward maybe, because he is actually committing to the second lab, so he can't that easily go into printing presses. At least he will have an additional happy face from the Stonehenge, and it's still nice to maybe have it in hand, to not be dependent on journalism in H2, where there's only one copy in two-player games. Still somewhat costly, but the alternatives are maybe not that great. Military technologies are not that important in two-player games, depending on the situation, of course, but with playing against Hammurabi and having no military ambitions maybe for himself, it's not that important. Those yellow cards are not that great, so I do think this turn still makes sense. Maybe it could have been actually an idea to just build a printing press, skip the wonder, and then wait for one of those H1 wonders and build maybe some printing press along the way until then. I do think it could be interesting, but I do think that turn is maybe also fine, even though it's a bit awkward committing to the second lab and maybe increasing the population and then delaying the science a bit, but he has more than enough science anyway, and being able to go for a printing press instead of the second lab maybe could have been an idea. Now it's my turn. I don't want to push the immigration with Fjantarik having the Stonehenge. This turn I will finish the pyramids. I could also just build a second lab now, but first of all, there's maybe still a chance that a second copy of printing press will appear on the row before my next turn, and there's also a copy of alchemy coming down the row, where maybe I have the chance to build an alchemy directly at some point, and getting the civil action earlier is maybe also not too bad, so I just went with finishing the pyramids here. After that, I actually still have 4 civil actions, together with the ability from Hammurabi, or that already included, so I have a lot of stuff that I could just take. I can increase my population, but afterwards I can just take a bunch of stuff. I could of course take maybe the swordsman, as I have the fighting band tactic, maybe some yellow cards, but at the end I actually decided to go for Saladin here. Not necessarily because it's a big improvement at the moment for myself. I mean, he's basically giving me the same as Hammurabi, only that I will get more draws now, which is nice. But I lose, of course, the ability to do nice revolution, but at this point it's maybe a bit late anyway. So it's more just a denial from Fjantarik. I do think him getting additional civil action would be a very big help for him. Maybe he doesn't need additional science from Confucius that much with having the Stonehenge and having an additional civil action to actually make use out of the additional science of the Stonehenge and maybe develop some technologies. I do think could be very valuable for him, and it was difficult to figure out a turn to maybe let Saladin stay in 2 civil actions, because if I don't take him, then the question is how else do I spend all of my civil actions if I don't take anything that isn't on a discard spot. So I just went for Saladin myself, maybe takes the opportunity to go for leader like Leonardo, but I do think having a lot of civil actions can potentially be quite strong in a 2-player game, so I just went for Saladin, and at least it means that later on during H1 I don't have to spend any civil actions to take a leader and can just I have that out of the way. I will now be playing with 6 civil actions, and I was hoping that that might allow myself to build up a strong position. So I elect Saladin, and then I made a decision to just take those 2 yellow cards that are on the row. I do think it could definitely be a fine play to maybe take the Swordsman, for example, instead of the Reserves or the Urban Growth, but there's another copy coming down the row, and that I will be able to take at the next turn, and so I just thought I will have now a lot of civil actions every turn, and then having some additional resource or potentially food to work with could be quite nice. Also having the Reserves allows myself to potentially build an alchemy directly at the next turn if I play it for resources, which could be quite nice. So yeah, with that I just went for taking those yellow cards, and if I think that I kind of need the Swordsman, I can still grab them at the next turn. I will draw a card, the Legion Tactic. Fjantarik seeds and opens the development of settlement. He will increase his population, takes a copy of Swordsman, takes a copy of Drama, interestingly. It's interesting that he is willing to spend a civil action here. It's of course definitely quite nice to have, allows him to maybe go for some very cheap buildings with Shakespeare potentially, or maybe Antony Gaudi, but there are also 2 copies of Opera, and I do think at this point he maybe has to be a bit civil action efficient, but on the other hand maybe he also didn't want to give this copy of Drama to me and allow myself to maybe go for a cultural leader potentially even early in H2, so he goes for the Drama here, and then as he has a full hand he could maybe just build a step of the Stonehenge, but he makes the decision to use the rich land here, actually build an additional farm which allows him to increase his population at the next turn, and maybe it will produce enough food to then replace the worker that was put in there until the end of H1. Taking the Drama also makes it that the breakthrough will actually fall down to 1 civil action, which I was very happy about, so another reason why I think maybe just skipping the Drama could potentially be fine. Now it's my turn. I definitely want to take the breakthrough, and there's another card that I definitely want to take, and that is this copy of Monarchy. First of all, with me already having some additional civil action sources, I do think it's a very nice way to just get my government form going. It can just work as a long-term solution, and also Fjantarik has the Stonehenge, has some science saved up. I don't want to allow him to invest that science into now getting an additional civil action going, so I think that is also a civil action that I definitely want to spend. However, with really wanting to spend those civil actions on taking breakthrough and monarchy, I don't have enough civil actions left to maybe just take the alchemy, develop it, play the reserves, build one directly. Now I am 1 civil action missing. I could have not taken the breakthrough, but I thought it's still nice enough to take the breakthrough, even though if I maybe don't, if it means that I can't build an alchemy directly. And so instead of building an alchemy directly, I just built a second lab, increased my population, still took the alchemy in hand. So if I then go for some upgrades, maybe already at the next turn with the urban growth, I have the potential to go for 2 upgrades. Means of course that I missed out on a civil action, but with having that many civil actions, soon maybe even getting the monarchy going, I thought that the additional science of just building the second lab now is more valuable than saving the civil action of potentially building alchemy directly at the next turn. So at the end I was fine with that turn, just taking some science from breakthrough, denying the monarchy, and also of course having it for myself, and then at the next turn maybe being able to increase my science production, or maybe just develop the monarchy. I at this point was willing to commit to the second lab because I don't want to wait too long for the printing presses. I do think having some additional science is also quite nice, and at this point I just went for the second lab. As you can see, I was willing to just skip the swordsman, but I have a third military action, and I do think it's just fine to be a bit greedy in 2-player games. I draw the new deposits and the uncertain borders. Fjantarik seeds and opens the development of religion. We both have a free population to take that free temple. Fjantarik will increase his population, which is possible thanks to having built a farm at a turn before. He will actually take Eleanor, but I think it makes sense. She is a nice transitional leader and she's available now for one civil action, while he doesn't know when those other leaders will be available for him. And then he just builds 2 steps of the Stonehenge. And he also has a full hand, so couldn't really take any more cards unless he elects Eleanor. Now it is my turn, I will take the free temple. I could just go for the monarchy, but I thought I have a lot of civil actions already and it's more important to get the alchemy going now, so that I also more easily can afford the monarchy and maybe still go for something like iron relatively soon afterwards. So I will go for the alchemy. Thanks to the urban growth I can go for 2 upgrades. I will take this rich land, a card that I definitely wanted to have. I'm relatively low in production and it will just mean getting maybe my iron upgrades going quicker. After doing all that, I have 2 civil actions left. I can use one of them to increase my population. I could potentially use another one to already play the reserves, but maybe it's also nice to not commit to the reserves already, with there being a development left and me not knowing whether I maybe can use the food to actually get an additional population out or not. So I kind of wanted to take one card, and the card that I maybe would rather prefer to have myself here is the Bread and Circuses, because there's Pierre in the game, there's Antony Gaudi in the game, I have already a free temple, so it's not really an ideal card, and I would be fine to just pass on it if I maybe could spend my civil actions on my civilization very nicely, which I could also do, for example, with using the rich... actually I've just taken the rich land, so I can't use it to build an additional farm or mine, yeah. I do think it could be a fine card to have, but also I think preparing for Pierre is still nice in 2-player games, but not as important as in 3 and 4-player games. As in 2-player games, just going for those theater library leaders is just often too strong, and then Pierre can still be nice. Maybe you can get him late in age 3, get to Olympic Games, and it's still quite nice then, but... yeah, so it would be a fine pick, maybe the pick that I would prefer, but at the end I actually went with the cartography, which also could potentially be nice. There's a Suez Canal in the game, maybe I will draw some colonies, maybe Fjantarik has actually seeded some colonies, and it would be a nice way, or a way to at least spend some of his science now. But the main reason to take the cartography, it's a somewhat useful card, maybe less useful, or I would have preferred to take the Bread and Circuses, but now with taking the cartography I put Fjantarik in a little bit of an awkward spot, because now with taking the cartography this copy of irrigation will land on this spot, meaning Fjantarik at his next turn has to decide, either he takes one of those copies for 2 civil actions, or if not, I can just deny the irrigation from him. It's an awkward decision to make, especially there's no ocean liner, so if he misses out on the irrigation, and with me having that many civil actions, there's definitely the danger that he will just be playing without any farm upgrades for the rest of the game. And if I wouldn't have taken the cartography, he could have just maybe finished the Stonehenge, did some stuff in the civilization, maybe taken the cartography, develop it, finish the Stonehenge or something like this, and then he can still pick the irrigation for 1, but now he has to make a decision whether he wants to pick the irrigation for 2 or not, and especially with him having limited civil actions, that was enough value for me that I actually took the cartography, even though it's a bit unclear how nice the technology will be. And then with my last civil action I will just increase my population, and I also will reveal the fighting band tactic, as I wanted to keep those new deposits in hand. I have a lot of civil actions, and even if the new deposits might give us a similar amount of resources, I think with having a lot of civil actions I will be better in investing those resources nicely, and that might just give me an even bigger boost than Fjantarik, who maybe could have some trouble spending the resource efficiently, at least as long as he is still on low civil actions. Fjantarik seeds, he has now seeded all of the events. Sadly I don't have any knowledge, and Fjantarik has the full knowledge, which is not ideal, but I still wasn't willing to seed at the turn before. And the development of warfare is open. He has a free population, can take the free warrior, will just finish the Stonehenge. Elects Eleanor, the age might very likely end before his next turn, and he is at the end actually willing to take this copy of irrigation. I do think maybe he makes a small mistake here. I think he should probably take this copy, because now, I mean, if he takes this copy, there's a chance that maybe the engineering genius could still be around, while now there's a chance that this copy of irrigation that he can't take anyway could still be around. So in such a situation, in a 2-player game where you can either take the left or the right copy of the same technologies that are available for 2 civil actions, I think it makes most of the time sense to take the right copy of it, to have potentially more interesting options available for you at the next turn. now it is my turn. I won't cede, I'm weaker at the moment, and also it's questionable how nice those events will be. I do think the new deposits has definitely some potential, but I wasn't willing to cede yet. And also I will actually be stronger after my turn, because after taking the free warrior, I complete now a fighting band tactic. And as you can see, the first card that I take here is this copy of Code of Laws. Fjantarik at this point has so much science saved up, he can just easily invest into it, and I do think it would be a very big help for him to go up to 5 civil actions. Now he will be stuck on 4 civil actions, will be extremely dependent on the H2 government forms. If he gets one early, he might still get a nice boost and then has a fine position, but if those are a bit later, I do think it could cause some huge trouble for him, and he could easily afford Code of Laws plus an H2 government form, so I think it's very nice to take it here, especially because I have maybe also the science to go for both Monarchy and Code of Laws relatively soon. I thought about developing the Code of Laws now instead of developing the Monarchy, because with developing the Code of Laws I haven't committed to a government form yet, meaning that if relatively early in H2 one of those H2 government forms is in a row, I have the option to take it and it not being a denial, but myself actually being able to use it, which could be nice, but at the end I thought I rather want to get a monarchy going, have the 3rd military action, and maybe I can also just deny a government form from H2. Especially because it's just a government form I need. The Code of Laws is a bit of a luxury depending on what I have to spend my science on in the next turns. Maybe it could also happen that I maybe don't go for the Code of Laws in the near future, and so I just want to have my 3rd military actions, but I do think it's definitely an idea of just developing the Code of Laws first, and with that leaving myself prepared to take the first H2 government form away and being able to use it for myself actually. Then after taking the Code of Laws and developing the Monarchy, I have 4 civil actions left. If I wouldn't have there wasn't a need to take the Code of Laws away, I think I would have thought about a turn where I take Iron, Irrigation, Machu Picchu and the Engineering Genius. I would have had the civil actions for it. However, now I don't have the civil actions to go for all of those things, and with that I made the decision to not go for the Machu Picchu. There are some other wonders coming down the road that could be interesting. There's something like Railroad, maybe you have a chance to win a colony, and then Suez Canal could be interesting, so I thought it's more important to deny the Code of Laws than setting up for a nice Machu Picchu. But I of course will still take the Iron, I will still take the Irrigation, and as the Engineering Genius is just an extremely efficient card to get for 1 civil action, I will also take that. Maybe I have the chance to build the Naimechi Castle soon, which just protects me and adds a bit of cultural production to my civilization. And for my last civil action, I have no full hand. I could develop the Irrigation, but I maybe don't need it in the near future already. Probably I want to go for Iron first, maybe I also want to go for Code of Laws before I go for the Irrigation. But I do think I have found a nice use for my last civil action here. Because the thing is, I will be at 3 food at my next turn, I will lose those 2 yellow tokens, and then I don't have an uprising issue, but I will be stuck on 3 food, and that can be a bit annoying, can cause some corruption issues. So at this turn I just use my rich land to build a 3rd farm. That means that at the next turn I have just enough food to increase my population, avoiding an uprising that I would now have with having committed this population to the 3rd farm. But unless there are rats revealed, which could be quite annoying, then I maybe would have to delete the farm immediately again, but it's maybe not that likely that there are rats in there. Fjantarik also went for a 3rd farm, so I thought chances that there are rats coming should be quite low, and then I will just be on lower food and just also will start generating a little bit of food. Also, if the selective breeding is late, I do think it is maybe just fine to go for the Irrigation at some point, and then being at 3 farms is maybe nice anyway, so I thought it's a nice use for my last civil action here. I will draw 3 cards that develop territory and a colonization card. Maybe at some point I can seed one of those colonies into the deck. Now H2 starts. Fjantarik seeds, is willing to seed despite being the weakest, maybe showcasing that there are not really bad strength events coming, but of course he is also Eleanor and maybe wants to push, so could also be that he is willing to take some risks here. A Confucius event is revealed, which I was happy to see, because Fjantarik at this point really doesn't need any additional science, while for me maybe the additional science could still be helpful. Fjantarik goes for the Irrigation this turn to get out of corruption and to also spend his civil action sufficiently, then just increases his population, leaves himself with at least 1 free hand space, which I think is extremely important, because it allows him to take an H2 government form for 3 civil actions and then still have a civil action left to develop it, with not having to make space in his hand first. Now it's my turn. I'm actually the strongest, and while I didn't really expect any strength events, I still thought now it's maybe a nice time to seed, especially because, at least for colonies, it could be nice to open one now and then win the tiebreaker. But I didn't seed one of my colonies yet, instead in new deposits. As I said, with me having that many civil actions, I might just be better prepared to use the additional resource more effectively. And I was also eyeing the railroad that is coming down the road. I thought about going for the Meiji Castle, but I will end up deciding to not go for it and maybe go for the railroad at the next turn. If I should go for the railroad, then of course the new deposits also might end up giving me more resource. Also, it will end up giving me more resource if I'm just able to maybe complete my iron upgrades quicker, which might take a little while for Fjantarik to get those going. So I thought the new deposits is just a very nice event to seed here. And with those coming, and also just generally, I wanted to start my production now. I will go for 2 upgrades. I could have now taken the Meiji Castle, but as said, the railroad with the 5 additional strength that I'm getting instead of the 2, despite it not producing any culture, which is important in the 2-player game, I think it's just a better thing to get, especially with the additional production, especially with the new deposits coming. And also, if I go for the Meiji Castle, then I don't have enough civil actions left to also take the Rifleman, and I have missed out on the Swordsman, and with that, I do think, despite it maybe being fine, being greedy sometimes, I do think that maybe would be a bit too greedy now that I have a relatively easy way to just secure myself that copy of Rifleman. So I take it in hand, and then, as I can't do that much with my last civil action, I could take one of those yellow cards, but for the urban growth it's unclear when I will be able to use it. Reserves is not that great of a card. There might be better cards coming already in the row. Taking the railroad might cost some civil actions, so I just play the reserves for resource at this point. I keep 1 colony and 2 colonization cards, and I get a very interesting draw here, 3 colonization cards. So if there's now a colony open in the near future, that might be a very lucky draw, but if not, then I might have to discard some at some point anyway. But I can maybe, of course, keep those H2 colonization cards and just seed the developed territory into the deck. Maybe I can even set up for the Suez Canal. So no, a very interesting draw, just getting those 3 defense cards and potentially a very valuable one. Fjantarik doesn't see it, either he's afraid of something or he just doesn't have a nice event to push. He starts going for some iron upgrades this turn, goes for 1 upgrade and then develops the Swordsman. Interestingly, isn't upgrading, but maybe just wanted to be civil action efficient. He knows that he isn't getting the Rifleman and maybe didn't want to spend the civil actions taking any of those cards. Now it is my turn. I am willing to seed the developed territory now that I've drawn all of those colonization cards and the event revealed. Yeah, it's just quite lucky how this went for me. First I draw 3 H2 colonization cards and then immediately afterwards the vast territory is revealed, so that was just extremely lucky. To be fair, even without those any H2 colonization card, I still would have been able to win it, but I would have had to send 2 warriors. Now I only have to send 1, and I was extremely happy to see this territory because I do think that just gives me an extremely big boost. Having those additional yellow tokens will help me a lot in the long term, maybe being able to build some culture buildings while still having enough population for everything else that I need. So I was very happy to win that, and generally with there being no government form being revealed yet for Fjantarik and him being stuck on 4 civil actions, while me having that many civil actions and some production already going. Now getting the vast territory, despite me falling a little bit behind in culture. When we take a look at the culture, I'm just falling a tiny bit behind, but also not that much, so I was at this point very happy about my position. I also think I have enough science to support going for this Code of Laws, going even up to 8 civil actions for the moment, as long as I still have Saladin. And then I indeed was willing to go for the railroad here. There is a Suez Canal coming down the road, but I don't have a colony in hand, so I do think the railroad is just a better choice, allowing myself to use the engineering genius nicely. I will first of all go for my last iron upgrade, increase my population to get out of corruption, then I take the railroad, and I will take this copy of reserves, which might be useful, and then I just build 2 steps of the railroad to use my civil actions effectively. Of course, you could argue that I have that many civil actions, I don't need to be civil actions efficient and could maybe just take the rich land, but the thing is, it might be that I just go for irrigations and then the rich land might only give me 2 resources, which might still be a fine deal with me having that many civil actions. But there are also some other interesting yellow cards coming down the row, and if I should draw a strong colony in my next draw, it could be nice to just finish the railroad and take the Suez Canal and then that would then already take quite a bunch of civil actions of my turn, and maybe if there's a government form that I potentially want to deny or some other important stuff, I just thought, despite me having that many civil actions, it could still be very valuable to have more civil actions at the next turn instead of taking one of those rich lands. I will draw 3 cards. I don't draw a colony, so Suez Canal might not be an option for me. Also, if I take this rich land, the Suez Canal might fall down to 1 civil action for Fjantarik. Who knows, maybe there's another colony coming that he could win, and then it could potentially be a nice wonder, but that's not that big of a reason with him having no colony yet. I don't draw a colony, but I do draw the classic army. Definitely nice to have a tactic. I know that I will get a copy of Cavalryman at some point. With having taken the Rifleman, I definitely will be able to fulfill this tactic. There's another colony revealed. It was the question if I'm willing to actually bid all of my colonization cards for that, with the developed territory coming. On the other hand, if I don't win it, then Fjantarik definitely starts to actually have a bit of a culture lead with winning this territory. I'm getting closer to him again, and that also definitely has some advantages. The happy face with maybe just wanting to go for some operas with either Anthony Gaudi or maybe Shakespeare if I should get a copy of journalism could also be quite nice. So I do think the historic territory is not that much worse than the developed territory, and I was just willing to go all in, especially because it could also mean that Fjantarik maybe has to send more in case he is actually willing to bid more than 5, but at the end I'm actually able to win it, and it definitely was extremely lucky having drawn that many colonization cards that early, and then 2 territories appearing immediately instead of them appearing before I have drawn those cards. So definitely some very lucky stuff here for me. Fjantarik this turn goes for an upgrade, with that gets out of corruption. He then interestingly goes for Nobel, which is an interesting decision. Of course, he's giving him some nice benefits, a bit of strength, a bit of science, which he, after going for a government form, might still need, despite having that much saved up. But on the other hand, a 2-player game is of course also always a bit problematic. As soon as you commit to an H2 leader that isn't a culture leader, you have to find some answers if your opponent is for if I'm now going for Gaudi, Fjantarik has to find some answers on how he wants to compete against Gaudi in the culture race. Maybe he has to go for some military, but you never know if you will get the right cards in H3, so it's a bit tricky. But I think one of the reasons why Fjantarik maybe was willing to go for Nobel is that he actually also gives him an additional civil action this turn, because he spent 1 civil action to take him, 1 to elect him, but now he's getting 3 back, meaning he was able to go for this mine upgrade while now still having 4 civil actions to take some cards, which he will use to take the scientific method and actually the strategy, so that he's nicely prepared for both Republic and the Conmon. So maybe with that in mind, it makes some sense. He has a full hand now though, which is a bit problematic, as he can't go into a government form at the next turn if it's on 3 civil actions, so that could be a bit bad. Maybe that could be a reason against going for that turn, but yeah, it just allows him to maybe go for some nice economy upgrades and have the strategy available either for a military push or just to not be screwed when he gets Republic. He also adopts the fighting band tactic, which is interesting because the strength doesn't make that big of a difference, and he's missing out on 2 draws. Maybe he has some nice cards that he needs on hand already, but maybe he wants to have that in case there's a colony coming, or just wants to do it at some point anyway, but maybe he could wait until he has more military actions. So it looks a little bit questionable for me to spend those military actions now this turn. Now it's my turn. I will finish the railroad, the new deposits are coming, and it just helps me also out with the strength, so I just wanted to have that finished. Then I will take the opera. Definitely want to have this as a way to transform my nice economy into some culture, especially with Anthony Gaudi coming down the row. I can just go for Gaudi, build an opera, and then I already have a leader that is producing me 3 culture per turn, and if I then get either journalism or team sports, I can make the culture that I get out of my leader even bigger. So I definitely wanted to have the opera here. I will also take the breakthrough, as I think I can still use some additional science. I definitely have a decent amount, but going maybe for military tech, for opera, for irrigation or selective breeding will take some science, and it could also be nice to have the option to go for an H3 government form in H3, even though of course I have a very fine amount of civil actions even after Saladin will be gone, but I still thought it's a nice card to take. I do think it's better to take than the revolutionary idea, because that needs an additional civil action to be played, and at this point I have enough science saved up so that the ability of being able to play the revolutionary idea up front is not enough value to, or is not relevant, and with that I think the breakthrough is just a more efficient card. And then I have 3 civil actions left. There are a bunch of yellow cards that I could just take, but I ended up not taking that many of them. I just take the wave, and then with my last 2 civil actions I will play the reserves, build a warrior and increase my population. The efficient upgrade I might only be able to use for 2 resources. I could have thought about taking the patriotism, but the problem with that is it could be a fine card for me, but I have now the wave in hand for some additional military resource, and if I take the patriotism, the revolutionary idea will be in a discard spot on Fjantarik's turn, while now with not taking the patriotism, I might still have a shot at getting the revolutionary idea, and probably it's a yellow card that I would like to have more than the patriotism, and also Fjantarik with having low civil actions and lots of science saved up might not end up taking the revolutionary idea. So I didn't want to take the patriotism to still have the option to go for rev idea at the next turn. So I just increased my population. The wave I think could still be quite nice. Building the warrior with the reserves makes me stronger. And also able to bid for colonies, even though that's not that relevant, because at the moment I can only bid once, so Fjantarik might win it anyway if it is revealed, but who knows, if I see it at my turn, at least maybe Fjantarik has to send a card or something, so it makes me stronger. There's only one unknown H1 event here, so could be that the strength is not that relevant, but maybe Fjantarik has seeded a strength event into the deck. I mean, he was willing to copy that fighting band tactic at the turn before. I draw 2 cards, a colonization card, so now I actually can again bid more for the colony. Again, a bit lucky at drawing that, already having drawn 4 H2 colonization cards now. Fjantarik this turn will go for the strategy, will then go for an upgrade to scientific method and increase his population to get out of corruption. With that he has still enough science to go for an H2 government form. It's definitely a bit unlucky that no H2 government form has been revealed yet, even though if it would have been revealed this turn, he wouldn't have had a nice way to take and develop it, or he wasn't able to do that. So maybe it is even fine for him that it isn't revealed this turn, as maybe it would have been even awkward having to spend a 3 civil actions, so he can now do this efficient turn. But if one isn't available for him at the next turn, it definitely would be very unlucky, and he could have also been lucky and just gotten one very early, which I think would have made a very big difference. But that's of course the problem in 2-player games, and why I think it is just extremely valuable somehow getting some additional civil actions from H1, but I do think I just denied all of those cards from Fjantarik, and he didn't have a very nice opportunity to get a card for more civil actions, as I just denied all of them. Fjantarik goes then for an upgrade from warrior to swordsman using the free military action that he is having now. I this turn will definitely go for Anthony Gaudi. Of course, I could also go for journalisms now and wait for Shakespeare, but Gaudi is available now, and Shakespeare of course could be strong, but I thought Gaudi is also perfectly fine, and he's available now, and also Fjantarik has committed to a leader, so I don't have to take Shakespeare away from him. I ended up not seeding here, because both of those events I maybe didn't necessarily want to push, as I might now be able to generate a culture lead, and then I don't want to be overly concerned about those strength events. So I go for Anthony Gaudi. I could already elect him this turn. I thought about electing him and then taking journalism, building a journalism directly, increasing culture and science production. But at the end I decided against it. I decided to keep Saladin for one more turn, getting an additional civil action one last time, and I will start with going for some food production. I will still take the journalisms in hand, as I think it just improves my culture potential by quite a bit, and it's maybe nicer to start with building some journalisms, especially now that I have this additional happy face from the historic territory. So I take the journalisms in hand, but instead of building a journalism, I will just start with going for some food upgrades. Of course, that means that I can't go for the selective breeding, but I have a nice yellow bank. I have 3 farms already anyway, so I think being now at the setup with having 3 irrigations is just perfectly fine, and I can just do that very efficiently, very cheaply. So I think the irrigation might just even be the better solution than the selective breeding. Maybe even if I would have had the selective breeding in hand. If I would have had already in hand, maybe the irrigation, or maybe the selective breeding would then be better, but now I just think it's the way more efficient solution. And then I have 1 civil action left, and I made a decision to take the revolutionary idea, maybe allowing myself to go into an H3 government form at some point. I draw an alternative tactic here, which I was very happy to see. The classic army would have worked, but now I only need one of those copies of cannons and have a very efficient way to get some strength, so things are definitely going very nicely for me in this game. Fjantarik seeds and opens the cultural influence. That was the event that he seeded. It doesn't make a big difference, and that is fine. Also, there was the Republic on the road during my turn, and I could have denied it, But there are not that many cards left, so if I denied, it could be that the Con Mon is just revealed immediately afterwards, which it actually is, and there might also be some H3 government forms soon, so I was willing to just give Fjantarik the Republic here, as it is now already quite late in H2. Fjantarik will then go for the Republic, increases his population, takes the team spots, there's Pierre in the game, and he needs still a Happy Face solution, and then he takes the efficient upgrade. Then it's my turn. I'm again weaker and made a decision to not push here. And the first card that I will end up taking is the Architecture. I definitely have enough science to go for the Architecture, and with my plan being maybe just building a bunch of operas and journalisms, the Architecture has the potential to easily save me 6, maybe 8 resources, maybe even more over the course of the game, maybe also some civil actions if I go for an H3 wonder, so I do think it's just an extremely valuable card that I want to secure for myself. And also after having gone for the food production and after now definitely having to replace Saladin, I thought now it's a good time to start building one of those urban buildings. I will go for Gaudi, I will develop the Architecture, I will develop the journalism, I will build a journalism and even a second journalism, just going very strong on or building up a lot of science production now. Again, maybe making it possible that I will be able to go for an H3 government form relatively soon in H3 if one should be available. And also I will go up to 8 culture production, so now I will maybe start catching up to Fjantarik and maybe also soon be able to overtake him in culture. After doing all that, I have 2 civil actions left, and I will definitely increase my population 1 time, just to be a somewhat civil action efficient. I could just increase the 2nd time, which I do think could be fine. But despite me having a lot of food production, I thought if I indeed want to build a lot of operas and journalisms, I could definitely still use a bit of additional food and an additional population, and with that I actually was willing to take the frugality here. At the moment it looks like I have a lot of food, why do I need more food? But if I go for the fortifications tactic and I also want to go for some operas, then relatively soon I might actually already run out of population. So I thought I still have a solid amount of civil actions, and the frugality is taking that for 1 civil action was something that I was willing to do. There would have been also an urban growth, but there will be the new deposits coming, so I don't need a resource as much. And also I wanted to let this copy of Cannon stay on 2 civil actions, because especially if the next copy is revealed now shortly after this copy of Cannon, then Fjantarik again has to decide, is he willing to take it for 2, or does he risk maybe me denying the 2nd copy? So I wanted to let it stay on 2 civil actions for Fjantarik. I keep the fortifications. Now that I have drawn it, I don't need to keep the classic army, as I am guaranteed to get a copy of cannons. Fjantarik seeds and the developed territory is revealed. I can bid my warrior on my card, but it's not enough to win it. But I got already very lucky with those colonies, so now Fjantarik at least gets the developed territory, but it's of course a lot less valuable than getting the vast territory earlier in H2. Fjantarik will take the cavalryman, goes for an iron upgrade, increases population 2 times, that gets him out of corruption, upgrades the lab to scientific method, and takes the breakthrough. He's not willing to take the cannons. I could potentially deny them, but maybe it could also mean that he has a tactic, but I actually have the knowledge that he doesn't have the classic army available, so maybe he is just willing to play it a bit more risky, as he is maybe a bit afraid of my potential, and could maybe, despite him having a culture lead still, and also now having built up a solid economy, his yellow bank is not as nice as mine, and with that I do think my position is favorable, especially because I have more resource production also, and just a very nice way of generating a lot of culture and maybe preparing for something like Hollywood. Now it's my turn. I know what the top event is, and the new deposits and additional resources will actually be helpful for me, so I made the decision to push an event. And I actually made the decision to push a strength event here, because I have the fortifications, I will get the cannons now, I have the wave of nationalism, I have a lot of population, I can still afford 1 or 2 operas, but afterwards I can maybe just build a bunch of military, and then Fjantarik is maybe forced to react while I just generate a lot of culture every turn, and he maybe doesn't have the ability to start producing some culture. And with that I was willing to see the politics of strength. Also I'm not willing to take the organized religion here for 2. There is Chaplain in H3, I have a relatively nice yellow bank, so maybe just building a bunch of operas will already be enough for the happy faces, but there is some risks that it could actually hit me at some point, so I am with that just committed to the politics of strength. Could have also committed to the international negotiations, was a close decision. I just wanted to have a strength event in there, or I just wanted to push and rather wanted to have one of two strength events in there. H3 starts. Fjantarik at the end actually discards the dramas and the printing press that he has taken for 3 civil actions, which I think was somewhat costly. I do think denying the printing press was definitely the right move. The drama may be questionable. At the end, he sadly didn't find a way to utilize those cards. I see it. The new deposits are revealed for 8 additional resources for myself. This turn I can set up 1 opera, I can increase my population. As you can see, I won't use the frugality, as with using it I actually would have some corruption issues. I will make it that I have 2 free population, I will take and develop the cannons, and then I have just 1 civil action left in order to use the wave. And with not using the frugality, I am able to use the resource of the wave to build 2 cannons and still get out of corruption just barely, so that works out very nicely. I will also reveal the fortifications tactic. I thought about if it is maybe better to not reveal it, because Fjantarik could just go for cannons now and copy it, and especially if he has no tactic available, that could be quite strong for him. But I just wanted to increase my strength by quite a bit here, especially also because there is this 1 H2 card that Fjantarik seeded, and I do think now it's just very nice to see on how Fjantarik reacts. Maybe he will just see it and it does make a difference, but if there's a strength event, he either just loses it now, which would be good for me, or he has to put quite a lot of effort into getting stronger, which then would be a very clear sign to me that there is actually a strength event coming, meaning I can just react and build more strength, and we might be stuck in a little bit of a strength race, but that would, I think, be beneficial for me, as I am now producing 12 culture per turn, while Fjantarik's only producing 2. And no, so I do think that was a very nice turn, getting that 1 opera going, also being now in a very nice position with my strength. Fjantarik seeds and opens the strategic territory, so there was no strength event. I had to think about whether I'm actually willing to send an army, a fortification, into this colony, but at the end came to the conclusion that it is a bit too costly. But what I was willing to send is a cannon, a warrior, and a colonization card. At the end, I'm even winning this territory for just a cannon and a colonization card. So again, lucky that I have even drawn this 4th colonization card early on, which caused Fjantarik to spend 1 of his colonization cards on the developed territory, and now maybe made a difference whether I am able to win the strategic territory or not. And now I just get 5 very early H3 draws. I have a tactic that's very interesting, the positional army, also some other interesting tactics, but for the positional army I already have the technology that I need in hand, 1 seedable event and another colonization card, so overall definitely a very fine draw. Fjantarik will go for the fundamentalism, which I do think is the right decision. He maybe needs to have some military options. It's probably looking a bit desperate for him, because I have just fortifications, I have lots of resources, a strong economy, and maybe punishing me with a war doesn't look that easily achievable, but having the option to do so, maybe if I should make a mistake or play it a bit greedy, I do think it's just very important. There's a Hollywood coming down the road, which has the potential to be extremely strong for me. Maybe he could have just denied that, but at the moment he isn't set up for Hollywood at all. But maybe he could still go for a little bit of things, maybe hope to get chaplains with movies at some point, and then denied it wonder from me. But it's also very, very costly, and so he just rather not goes for the Hollywood, goes for the fundamentalism, takes the cannons for 2, I let him stay on 2 civil actions, he has to spend an additional civil action now, and then he will fix his happy faces with going for team sports, develops the cannons, builds 1 is using the 1 free military action, and also makes sure to get stronger with building the team sports and the cannons, which is a bit annoying because I've seeded the politics of strength and I have to get stronger now, but with just building 1 cannon I have a very nice amount of strength again. With the politics of strength being in there, I didn't want to push this turn, and one thing that I definitely wanted to do is to take this Hollywood. Of course, Fjantarik can't really use it, and maybe I have to be concerned about the military with him having taken the fundamentalism, but I think I can still set myself up for the military and also take this Hollywood, and I do think with taking this Hollywood, I just take all of the peaceful options away from Fjantarik, because whatever he will be able to do, maybe he gets Pierre, maybe he gets Red Cross, I don't think he can compete peacefully against my setup with already having a lot more culture reduction, having those cheap buildings with the architecture and then the Hollywood. So I do think he's now kind of forced to go into something with the fundamentalism, but for that he needs the right cards, and also I have the fortifications tactic and even the positional army tactic now to defend myself. So at this point I was very confident about my position, and I do think that just blocks blocks Fjantarik in a position where maybe he has to try something with the war, and if he doesn't, it might just not be big enough to compete it against his Hollywood. And after having taken the Hollywood, I definitely want to get stronger. I will increase my population, again reducing the frugality, but this time I will have corruption anyway. And with the last 2 civil actions, I take the military build-up. At this point, I maybe just have to make sure to not get hit by a war, and the military build-up and the 8 additional resource will be extremely helpful for that. Patriotism, because of the additional military action, maybe could have been also nice, because if I don't get the military theory, then I could be somewhat limited, but at the end I rather went with the additional resources. I will draw 2 cards. I actually draw a war and an armed intervention. Fjantarik Seeds, and I also get again lucky with the Politics of Strength being the first card, so I can get 5 additional draws. I have now Impact of Strength in hand, which maybe could be a bit risky to commit towards, but Impact of Variety is a very nice seed. Fjantarik this turn goes for the engineering, and we can see here that he is trying to maybe set up for a more peaceful option. He is not going all in into the military, he is doing some investments to maybe have some other options. He will go for the mechanized agriculture, goes for an upgrade, builds the cannon to again use this through military action, but is actually also willing to copy the fortifications, even though it means that he is still not the strongest during my turn. He then takes the revolutionary idea and the patriotism, and I do think with him going for Meg Ag and the engineering, it's a very clear sign that he is setting up for the Red Cross and wants to set himself up to maybe be able to take and finish it potentially, which he can't do at the next turn yet, but at all of the following turns, if he should be able to set himself up nicely if he wants to. The question is if that Red Cross will be big enough against my Hollywood, but maybe if he doesn't have a war, it's of course also a tough decision to go all in, but maybe the right one. On the other hand, I've drawn that many cards, might have H3 tactics, so it's also maybe not looking that great to try something with the war, especially with me having the better resource production, having some additional strength from the colony and the railroads, so maybe he is also thought that is also unlikely to be successful. Then I will see the impact of variety. The terrorism is revealed, which is a bit annoying, but also isn't the end of the world for me. I will use the frugality. I will build an additional opera already this turn. Fjantarik, with him having committed resources into this mechanized agriculture upgrade, is at the moment not that threatening. Can go for fundamentalism in another army, but I can easily threaten enough strength to, at this point, not being in danger of a war. So I build this theater. Maybe one of those will get destroyed immediately again, so it's maybe nice to build one already this turn. And then I have 5 civil actions left, and as it was a bit of a theme of this game, I will continue with going a bit of civil action denial. I will go for the civil service. I thought I have enough science to just support, maybe going for an additional civil action, and the additional blue token will also help me to get out of corruption this turn. Fjantarik has enough science to easily maybe go for civil service, and it could still give him a bit of a boost, maybe help him for some impact, so I thought it's a fine card to go into. It's not completely it's not very strong for myself, but still maybe strong enough, and it's also a denial, so I was willing to just take and develop it. And then with my remaining civil actions, I will just take some additional resource in hand so that I can make the Hollywood relatively big. Maybe also allowing myself to potentially finish the Hollywood and still being able to defend reasonably well, in case that should be better than just committing everything into military. And with my last civil action, at the moment I'm in corruption, and at the end I could just take corruption, but at the end I was willing to build 1 step to get out of corruption, which could be a bit risky if Fjantarik somehow still finds a way to set up for a lot of strength. Maybe having invested 5 resources into the Hollywood already could be bad, but as said, maybe just finishing the Hollywood and not defending as good as against the war could be quite nice. And with the military build-up, I actually was still very confident that I will be able to defend against the war nicely, with having Rifleman, this tactic, and maybe soon being able to get a copy of Air Forces. I keep the tactic and the 2 colonization cards. I will draw the impact of science, which potentially could be nice. At the moment we are both at 8 science production, but Fjantarik will lose Nobel at some point. Fjantarik Seeds in the arms industry is revealed, giving Fjantarik 4 and me 2 resources. He will develop the engineering, goes for 1 more upgrade to mechanized agriculture, meaning that even after increasing his population, he still has enough food to take and finish the Red Cross at the next turn potentially. He will also take the endowment, the urban growth, the modern infantry, replace the patriotism. Just spending this 1 resource to build this 1 cannon is enough to get him out of corruption. and then at the next turn he is prepared to maybe just take and finish the red cross if he wants to, and that also would have been easier to do for him if he would have had a civil service or not a reason for me to deny that card. Now it's my turn. I don't want to unnecessarily commit to the impact of science, so I just skip my politics phase, and this turn there's a copy of democracy available. I still have just enough science to go for it, which also was one of the reasons why I was willing to go for the civil service. Well, actually I have also the revolutionary idea in hand, but the democracy is just giving me an even bigger boost, giving me even more potential, and maybe Fjantarik with the science saved up could just go for the democracy for some additional for some additional culture reduction. So I was willing to go for it. Of course, I had to check if that maybe leaves myself too vulnerable, but it doesn't, because after going for the democracy, I can take the military theory, and thanks to the revolutionary idea, I can still threaten to go for the military theory, and with that, and with having a lot of resource saved up, I can just go for easily for 2 more armies, develop the military theory, and Fjantarik, with only having 12 resources available at the moment, can't go for 3 cannons. With that, he is definitely somewhat limited in his strength potential, and I'm completely safe, and in 2 turns, if I'm not spend any more resource on any opera things, I can threaten 3 armies plus military theory, which also I thought should be enough, especially with maybe also having the chance to go into air forces. This turn I will then build 1 more opera. I still have more than enough resource to defend myself. I will increase my population to get out of corruption. I will take the movies. I thought it could be nice to have, as I was hoping to maybe get Chaplin, and then I can make my Hollywood even bigger. And then I thought about just taking the efficient upgrade. That has the advantage that I don't spend any more resources, and also every additional bunch of rocks could make my Hollywood even bigger. If I, for example, can, thanks to the efficient upgrade, go for an additional upgrade from operas to movies, that will give me 1 culture reduction and 2 culture for the Hollywood during the last turn. But at the end, I came to the conclusion that even after building another opera, I still have more than enough resource to defend myself, and it just giving me 3 culture reduction immediately. So I just at the end was willing to build this opera. I thought about building a journalism, but I might need a happy face very soon, especially if I maybe at the end don't get Chaplin, if Fjantarik maybe goes for a bit of a denial, or maybe just sets up 1 movie for himself. And then I read out just wanted to have the additional happy face and also more culture production available than the additional journalism. Then I keep the impact tactic, draw some new cards. The impact of culture will be a very strong impact for myself. Fjantarik seeds, the Cold War is revealed. He gets some additional science, which could be nice potentially for him. He is actually willing to take the space flight. I was a little bit surprised at first, as he is so nicely set up for the Red Cross, but when we take a look at his turn, I think it makes a lot of sense, because he will now develop some technologies, increases his population, takes the rockets in hand, plays the mechanized army tactic with the free military action that he is having, and then he will just end his turn. And when we take a look at his civilization, we can see he has 16 resources saved up. He has the engineering, he can finish the space flight with only 1 civil action. Afterwards he has still 6 civil actions left, and even if the Red Cross if the Red Cross is available in the 3 civil action area, he can't take and finish it, but he has to take some gambles anyway, and if it is available for cheaper, he can finish the space flight, take the Red Cross, and finish the Red Cross. So I think he is setting himself up very nicely. The problem for him is he's falling behind in culture very heavily, and my Hollywood will maybe be as big as the space flight and the Red Cross combined for him. So even though it is a very nice way how he is trying to score a lot of peaceful culture, I do think it's maybe not big enough at the end. But he has the endowment, so yeah, you will get some additional culture going. And the nice thing is that he also is at the same time still threatening a bit of strength. He has the mechanized army tactic, he can declare war, go for the fundamentalism, build 3 units, and that would give him plus 20 from the tactic, plus 9 from the units, plus 6 from the fundamentalism, so plus 35, but he will lose Nobel, so plus 33, putting him at 52 strength. So I definitely have to be a bit concerned about it, because 2 more armies with military theory is actually not enough to be safe from a war. It's my turn. I see the impact of culture. The impact of competition is revealed, which is a better one for Fjantarik, giving him plus 5 against me. This turn I will take a copy of reserves. I think I will also take the second copy of reserves, just giving me as many resources as possible. First of all, to have enough resources to be safe from a war, and second of all, to make the Hollywood as big as possible. And as you can see, the red cross is available. I thought about if maybe it could be an idea to finish the Hollywood now and deny it, but first of all, the Hollywood would be quite a bit less big than it can be at the next turn, and I would spend too many resources so that I'm not completely safe from a war, so that's not an option. But what I was aiming towards is to let the red cross stay in 2 civil actions, so that Fjantarik at least has to spend all of the civil actions to finish spaceflight and take the red cross, and then he can't do anything else, meaning he doesn't get any leader or stuff. So that was something that I was aiming towards, meaning I won't take any of those cards. I don't need the Air Force to defend myself. I thought about taking them, maybe setting something up with Rifleman, but I will actually make it that I have more than 30 resources for the military available at the next turn, which allows myself to go for the military theory and 6 small cannons, and that will be enough to win a potential war. I will already take Chaplin this turn, develop the movies for cheaper with Antoni Gaudi. Go for Chaplin. I thought about building an additional movie, but then again I don't have more than 30 resources for the next turn for my military, so instead I increased my population, played a revolutionary idea, which is extremely important so that I can still develop the military theory at the next turn, and then I will just go for 2 upgrades, and that costs me 6 resources, but with that I still have 16, plus 8 is 26, and then with the military theory I am or 24, and then with the military theory I have 32, so I have enough to build 6 cannons, and I also have enough civil actions. I have 10 civil actions, so I can develop military theory, play military build-up, play reserves, get 5 new population, and just build all of those cannons. I have just enough military actions to do so I'm not in danger of a war, and with all of those reserves and the engineering genius I will be able to make this Hollywood very big. Fjantarik has also a nice turn ahead of him, being able to finish spaceflight and the red cross during 1 turn if he wants to, but yeah, with this big Hollywood, my big culture production, that should not be big enough for him to catch up. At this point I just discarded a positional army tactic as I will lose the Rifleman anyway. I draw the impact of architecture, which will be a nice impact for me. Fjantarik this turn will finish the spaceflight, takes the red cross, and then I was a bit surprised at first when I saw that he actually doesn't finish the red cross and instead goes for Pierre, but of course it makes a lot of sense when you think about it, because he will now miss out on 1 step of the red cross. It's a 12 culture swing against me, but if he goes for Pierre he will get 8 from the Olympic Games, 2 culture production this turn, and at least 2 culture production at the next turn with the potential for more, so that's just better for him. But yeah, with him not getting the full red cross plus Pierre, it's just maybe not enough, and he is at this point already falling behind quite a bit. During my turn I will see the impact of architecture. I could have also seen the impact of science, but there's maybe some risk that Fjantarik could overtake me, and the impact of architecture might end up being similarly strong than the impact of science, maybe even stronger. So I see that one into the deck. The impact of population is revealed, which actually ends up being better for me than for Fjantarik. And then this turn was just all about making the Hollywood as big as possible. First I will start with building a step of the Red Cross. I can build a theater, build a journalism, play both copies of reserves, go for 1 more upgrade, and then I have still enough resources to finish the Hollywood for 52 culture. So a very nice Hollywood, very strong. I have now at 30 culture production, and then I have just 1 civil action left that I can use to develop the military theory, which is helpful for a bunch of impacts and makes me a bit stronger, but the impact of strength I actually discarded, so that's not really relevant. So a very strong last turn, a very strong Hollywood, and that should be enough to win the game. Fjantarik seeds and opens the impact of happiness, an unfortunate timing for him as he at the moment has an unhappy worker and he will fix this turn, so definitely unlucky for him the timing of this impact. He will build a bunch of arenas for Pierre, builds an additional mine, maybe has something like impact of harmony in there, or balance, maybe, or no, actually not, he has only 6 science production, so, and for harmony he is at the moment missing a military unit, so maybe just doing some stuff. He will then copy a tactic and ends his turn. And with upgrading a warrior, just make sure to be strong in case I see the impact of strength in there, but when we take a look at the culture before the final impacts, that gap is definitely too big in order it being possible to overtake. Well, the lead will be too big, and there's no way that those 4 impacts will be enough to overtake me. First one was indeed impact of balance, then there's impact of architecture, which gives me plus 10. There's the impact of variety, so most of those impacts are actually from myself anyway. The last one is the impact of culture, and with that I win the game with quite a lead, and yeah, that game at the end just went extremely smooth for me. I, in the early game, just denied all of the civil action sources. Fjantarik had a Stonehenge, but for a long time the science was just stockpiled, and that is a situation where the Stonehenge maybe ends up being quite bad. Of course, at some point he used the science, but for a very long time it was just lying around. And no, was maybe a bit unfortunate that he didn't have a nice way to take all of those cards, but it's of course the advantage of having the pyramids plus Hammurabi, and Fjantarik was not that easily able to take something like Code of Laws or Monarchy for 3. I think he had some opportunities to take those cards, but it also would have been very expensive, and I was able to deny all of those cards. The H2 government forms were late, and with that I just at some point had a very nice advantage, getting this early railroad, having a very, very solid economy. Fjantarik then committed to Nobel, meaning that I was knew for certain that I could go into a culture lead, and with Antoni Gaudi I quickly developed a culture lead. I also got lucky with the fortifications tactic, with winning the vast territory, so I do think a lot of things just went very, very right for me in this game, and then also yeah, with me being prepared for the Hollywood and Fjantarik not, even though Fjantarik did try some very creative stuff, preparing for turn where he potentially can finish 2 wonders. It's just not barely enough to, or not barely, but not even close that it's enough to compete against such a big Hollywood. So that is just very dominant in 2-player games. And yeah, so with that I have won this 2-player game against Fjantarik. And at this point, also the game again between Fjantarik and Kogito has finished, and that will now decide if I, despite me winning this, it could still be that I now don't have the chance to win my group any longer, and that will now be very exciting. And we will now take a look at the standings, and we'll know how this other game ended between Fjantarik and me, Fjantarik and Kogito. And sadly, as you can see, Fjantarik was able to win against Kogito, and when we take a look at the standings, that sadly yeah, buries my hopes of maybe still winning the group after having really not a great performance in the 3-player games. I now managed to win the first 2 2-player games, but even if I win my last one against Gandin, I am at 23 points, so actually the same as Fjantarik has, but sadly Fjantarik finished before me in 2 of the 3-player games and 1 of the 4-player games, meaning that he will win the tiebreaker despite me having won the 2-player game against him, and with that it sadly means that I will actually go already into the lower bracket for the next stage. Definitely an outcome that I'm of course not happy about, but I mean it was a tough group. I was able to skip the first few stages because of the new tournament system, but of course that means that once I enter the tournament it's already quite some tough competition out there, and no, it ended up being a very close group. This is despite it's a very close group, regardless on how the last game between me and Gandin will finish at the end. And sadly, no, I, at the end, wasn't able to make it. But the good news is that last year, Marta Pescher went very early into the lower bracket, and he actually won the whole thing. So with that, the tournament is definitely not over. It means, of course, that from now on I have to win my group every time. Definitely a tough task, especially because there were some other upsets, maybe some other groups where the supposed favorite didn't win, and meaning there are actually quite a bunch of strong players out there for the lower bracket, so it could definitely happen that it will again be a very tough task to manage to win the group in the next stage as well, but I'm not out of the tournament, and I will give my best to make my run as deep as possible, ideally making it to the finals again. But of course, this group is not decided yet, because we don't know who will win it, and it will depend on the outcome of the last 2-player game. If Gandin manages to defeat me in the last 2-player game, he will manage to win the group, but if he loses against me, Fjantarik will be able to win the group, so that should still be exciting. For most of the 2-player game, of course, I didn't know that I didn't have any chance any longer, so I definitely did my best, and also now, of course, for the last few turns, I will give my best, also because I think being at a better result might also put me in a better seeding basket for the lower bracket, and of course my clicker rating after not so great results in recent tournaments is dropping quite low, so I would like to buffer that a little bit and not be soon out of the top 10, so a lot of motivation still being left for me, despite now knowing that I don't Yeah, I don't will be able to win the group. And yeah, with that, I hope you are still excited to see the last game against Gandhin, and knowing then how the group ended at the end and which of those players will make it to the upper bracket of the next stage. And then I say thanks for watching, have a nice time, and see you in the next video.